Hello and welcome to interest.co.nz. I'm Janae Tibshirani and today I'm joined by the Retirement Commissioner Diane Maxwell for one of our double shot interviews. Thank you, Diane, for joining us.
That's good. Good to see you.
Look, today we're going to be talking about vulnerable groups in retirement. Now, this is a pretty big topic that canvasses a lot of things.
It is.
But to crack into it, I'd just like to know what your thoughts are on how our declining level of home ownership is making more people vulnerable when they head towards retirement.
So we would certainly see people renting as more vulnerable reaching retirement. We're seeing a larger group of renters in their 50s moving through into their 60s, and that is going to be an issue. If you think about some of the uncertainties around renting, you're at the mercy of a landlord who could tell you they're going to sell the property. That can create, I think, some worry about what might happen next. We know that moving house is tiring, it's expensive, you've got to pack everything up, you've got to find a new home, and people tell us through the surveys that we've done in the last month how hard that is actually for them emotionally and financially. And actually, as you get older, and I rented for years and years and years, and moving is a killer. Physically, it's hard as you get older. So we see those declining rates of home ownership as very challenging for retirement and retirees.
How do you think our tenancy laws need to be strengthened to protect renters?
Well, if you come back, and I think you and I have talked about this before, if you come back to the idea that you're trying to create certainty for people, then tenancy laws that enable people to have that certainty, there is just a no-brainer. How can people move into a long tenancy where they have some protection and they understand what's ahead of them, and they can maybe think 5 years out? If you think about the challenges with renting, where do you get to know your neighbours if you're not there for long? What do you invest in the surrounding community? Those are all the issues we're trying to address. So, I've got some good friends that rented for 10 years. They signed a 10-year deal, and that worked for them. They had certainty for their children in school, and it meant a lot. So, I would fully agree with that we need to be looking at those tenancy laws, saying, do they protect the tenant enough? Do they protect the landlord in the right way? And what do they provide us with?
So perhaps legislate so that there have to be some minimum, tenancy agreements, or that there is a minimum of, say, a year, and then if both parties agree, you can opt out and make it shorter.
Yeah,
or
I think
some standards around that.
Well, I think I think we've got to change our mindset over renting. Renting can be a choice you make, and then you need some protection around that choice. So I think there should be options in the market for people to say, I'm looking for a long-term tenancy, and a landlord to say, I'm looking for a long-term tenant, and then how do we wrap that up? To some extent, that's available today, but I think it could do with a bit of a tweak.
Sure. Or even capping rents, or I think in Berlin they introduced some legislation where, I need to get this right, but I think they capped it at a certain amount, so landlords couldn't increase rents by more than 10% in certain areas above the sort of normal market, or something like that. Could that be an option? Yeah,
I think over time you want to say, what certainty do you give people? The only thing I would say is, even as a homeowner, there is often uncertainty about interest rates. So for a landlord who might go through aggressive interest rate rises, they are going to have a problem if the rent at which they rent that place out is capped. So you do need to appreciate the other things that are moving in the market. I don't think it's easy. I'm sure there are some great examples around the world that we could steal from.
Okay. Look, another sort of changing social dynamic we have is there seem to be more single people.
And
so, due to globalisation, people are moving around the world, and then people aren't having that sort of getting married, staying married and living like that forever. People are choosing not to get married, or divorce is much more socially acceptable. So how does that make more people vulnerable?
I was just up in the UK, and apparently their biggest group of divorcees at the moment are 80-somethings.
Oh, really?
Quite odd, yeah. In the vulnerable groups survey that we did, the really heartbreaking responses actually were from single parents who said they'd raised children and they'd sort of spent the last 20 years really focused on that, and they're now in their 40s or 50s, and they look up and look around and realise they're in trouble. The other thing that emerged is people looking after children, people looking after elderly parents, people have dependents, and also people financing their adult children's education and their own home ownership aspirations. So many people in their 50s, heading towards retirement in the next 20 years, were getting pulled in lots of different directions financially, that was causing them some grief. So back to the single household thing, yes, certainly we have an increase in single households. That does make for more expensive living, in that you still have to heat the house no matter how many people in it. You've still got to keep the lights on. You've still got to pay your insurances. You still have to pay for all that stuff. And if you're dividing it by one, that is certainly more expensive. And we're finding people living alone are telling us that they feel more financially vulnerable. And if you look at the numbers, they probably are.
So superannuation in its current form, there is a difference between
it does
a couple
reflect that.
It does reflect
right.
that. Do you think that actually there needs to be more of a difference so that it helps those
it's a really
single people a
difficult
bit
call.
more?
I'm glad it reflects the difference.
Sure.
Should it reflect it more? I don't know. I'm not sure that I do believe that. There's a lot of debate around this. There's quite a few people who think it should just be on par with a couple. But I think certainly we need to reflect the fact that there are increased costs in living alone. The question is, to what degree do you do that? You might have couples watching this saying, well, actually, we've got costs too. And they might have medical costs that are high. There might be all sorts of things going on that elevate the costs for them. And that's the difficulty with some of these issues.
I wonder if there are some other, I don't know if the Commission's been thinking about some other sort of creative ways to help curb that isolation, because there's a social component to that, and there's a financial component
and there's a
to
health
that as well.
component. And if you do lots of reading on this stuff, isolation impacts health and well-being. It impacts your physical health and your mental health. And we all look for connectedness and we all look for meaning. A number of the people who keep working through their 60s and sometimes 70s tell us it's because they're physically fit enough to want to do that, but also they love the connectedness. They want to go to work, they want to have colleagues, they want to have a cup of tea or a drink after work. For people who've stopped work and are living alone and may find that in the neighbourhood they live, everyone's working, so everybody leaves at 8 in the morning and comes home at 6 or 7 at night. There may not be that many people to connect with during the day. I'm conscious of the way our neighbourhoods are developing too. We're far more likely to have big fences to wall ourselves off, and we're guilty of that too. We've now got a fence. And so some of those impulsive conversations and connections across the garden and across the street may not happen in the same way. Having said that, as people stay physically fitter longer, there are still lots of opportunities to get out and be involved in different groups. I think of my mum, who's learning Italian and going to yoga and got 2 book clubs on the go, and she's out and about. And also you think about things like Skype, where she lives in London, we're in Auckland, she Skypes us, she speaks to the grandchildren, and there's a lot of connectivity. So I don't think we're heading to complete disaster. I think there's still some really good things, but I think isolation really is a challenge as people perhaps move into that later stage of retirement, where they can't jump in the car and go see a friend for a cup of tea. That's when things get harder, I think.
And maybe can't afford to go to a retirement village, or don't want to.
Or maybe
as well.
Can't, that's right. Which is where low cost, dry, clean, affordable housing for older New Zealanders who need to rent is a critical thing.
Yes. That's a key point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look, Diane, the other thing is when we talk about vulnerable groups, I really like the way the Commission for Financial Capability has approached this, in the sense that it's not just about low-income people being vulnerable, but it's more about, I guess, anyone getting older being vulnerable, in the sense that any losses you make to any investments, you have less time to recoup it.
Yeah.
So I was just, investments are risky, but I'm wondering whether there are things the government can do to lower that risk for people heading towards retirement.
So we say vulnerability comes in many forms, and you're right, as you reach retirement and you've got your hard-earned savings, you need to protect it, maintain it, grow it if you can, but above all, protect it. In terms of how you reduce that risk, you can't take risk out of a market, because that's how a market works. risk and reward. So I don't believe you can take risk away or should take risk away. I think what helps is really, really good investor education, have the right information available, have the right level of regulation available. The FMA is an active regulator in the market. Good information flow if people have concerns, they report those concerns, and good advice. So it's never one thing, it's all of those things. It's people take the time to do due diligence. Never think your mate down the rugby club is a financial advisor, unless he is a financial advisor, because, you know, I wouldn't ask someone random for health advice, and I wouldn't ask someone random for financial advice either.
And actually that taps into a really key issue at the moment. The Financial Advisors Act, which is the legislation that regulates advice, is being reviewed at the moment.
That's right.
Contentious part of that is the issue of commissions. So currently financial advisors are paid commissions by the insurance companies and that sort of thing whose products they sell. But the issue is a lot of consumers don't often know who the advisors are being paid commissions from.
No.
The government's reviewing this, but it sounds like it's not going to take away commissions or cap them or ban them. What are your views on this, on this issue of commissions? I mean, this is how financial advisors are paid. If we didn't have commissions, people would have to pay more in fees, which would take that advice away from them.
Well, people hate paying for advice, you know. In New Zealand, we're really bad at paying for advice. For me, the main thing is, do you know what you're paying and when and how much and at what point? All of that needs to be very, very clear. And if you're getting advice and you're not sure, be really clear in your questions. I'm sorry, how are you getting paid and how much will that be? Could you just be really clear with me about that? So that's a really important question. I think where things get murky is where you've got a trail commission, where an advisor might be tempted to churn you into another policy to reactivate a new commission stream. And I think then it comes back to those questions about, why would I want to move a policy? What's in it for me? You know, why would I want to do that? So it's up to us to ask the hard questions, but also as we go through the Financial Advisors Act review, I hope that keeps being challenged so that we get to a good place with people understanding truly what they're being charged.
So great, more disclosure.
More disclosure and more feisty retirees and near retirees going, you got to explain this to me because, tell me again, and keep telling me till I get it.
Sure. So you're comfortable with leaving commissions in there because that essentially is what's funding the industry.
Yeah, it's a really hard call because where you go to fee for advice, people are reluctant to pay the fee.
Yeah.
And also the fee often is insufficient to remunerate an advisor to run a viable business. Now, it's not quite as simple as that, but in reality, how does the advisor get paid appropriately for the work that they do? How do you get value out of it? How does the provider get value out of it? And how do you get what you need? And I think that's what they're grappling with at the moment. I haven't yet seen the final recommendations, and I'm happy for us to do another piece when we do get there.
Sure. Okay, look, Diane, finally and quickly, there's KiwiSaver.
Yes.
The Commission's been speaking out a lot, along with the FMA and MB, about fees being disclosed on your statement in dollar terms, so you can better understand them. What work is the Commission doing around KiwiSaver?
So my colleague David Boyle has been doing a lot on this with the industry and the government. Nirvana for us is that information is loud and clear on the statement. That's where we're heading, and I hope that's where we get to.
Okay, sure. Dane, thank you so much for your time today.
Cool.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm Janae Tipsharani from interest.co.nz.